Great, thank you so much. I have the terrible assignment of standing between you and your departure. So we will try to keep this a little bit shorter, this discussion part, as well as the open floor. So I think I'll start where you ended, Dennis, talking about, that collective responsibility. I'm curious about what the community uptake has been like in your region. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We're fortunate. In this last initiative, I can tell you right now, we have persons who are importing garbage. The communities that we're targeting now are Terrestrial and Greenville, and we've seen people coming from La Hoqueta, from Carapo, on the scheduled days and actually bringing their waste. That suggests to us that there's actually an interest in what we're doing. It means that we've done something right with respect to communicating that need for change, and all we can do now is improve it and do better with it. But I can say that at least in those communities, there is a pocket of interest. How much of the rest of the region, I can't say yet, but I believe that if we communicate it well enough, if we build that narrative, and if we demonstrate why what we're doing is important, we'll get the community support.
And are you interested in measuring that feedback or that sort of uptake from the community?
Monitoring and evaluation is part and parcel of what we do. It's how we're able to demonstrate to the agencies why we need to maintain the funding that we have, because we don't have it in our recurrent annual budget expenditure. It's not a feature of the current budgeting process. So we have to rely on our international agencies and partners. So that M&E component is there. We are still within the first month of relaunching the project, so I cannot say that I have updated M&E reports on how much we can quantify it. But at the end of the 6-month period, we have to produce something because we had to go back and beg again because we're hoping to get some more money to continue the project. Yeah.
Well, thankfully, you're now connected directly with the Green Fund.
Yes. Very thankfully.
And I do like this about this panel, the diverse representation of community and people, as a panel. Tracy, you would belong then to Dennis's region. Yeah. And I am sure that there are certain, let's say, pearls of wisdom that coming from your community and your background, you would perhaps like to share with us that you think we would be better off for. I mean, you spent a lot of time talking about the relationship to the land, and we could probably talk about that for a very long time. But if there were a few things that you could impart to your fellow citizens coming from your ancestral wisdom, what would those be that we would be better off for?
There's a story that's really just one line. And the more you think about it, is the more that it resonates. So the indigenous hunter never goes into the forest to hunt without seeds in his pocket. Now, think about that for a bit. Because it means that that hunter understands that nature is regenerative. That hunter understands that reciprocity is necessary. And that hunter also understands that through their intervention, they can make a difference. Through that hunter putting his hand in the soil, he can make up for what he is taking out of the forest. Well, he can even feed other animals with those seeds. And so you see, it's one line, but it's a story that can really resonate the more you think about it. Because we can even apply it in the way that we approach our relationships to each other. Earlier on, Johnny mentioned an exchange of energy. We're constantly exchanging energy with each other. But if we're being honest in our exchanges, how much are we watering each other? Or are we just taking and not giving? There has to be a balance. And so that's what that hunter understands as well. The hunter understands that he is about to take a life. But that is also the way of nature. Life and death is part of nature. But so how do we make amends if we are going to take? How do we make amends if we're going to extract? And yeah, just that one line, just think about it a bit.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Certainly a lot of food for thought. And I have to go to the corporate financial sector now, right? I think that's a great segue. Not to classify you as a hunter or anything, Arya. But I'm sure you do see the value in what Tracy is talking about. And I imagine that being a sort of pioneer in the local financial sector and possibly in the wider region where some of this work is concerned, what are some of the challenges? I mean, we've heard a lot about the challenges today, of course, but what are some of the challenges that are specific to your sector and advancing your green agenda?
So I think that's a great, and I'm definitely not a hunter, let's just clarify that one. And it's a challenge that I think we've exhausted. We all know it, and I'm going to say it again, data. Data is, and I'm not even talking about accurate or reliable data, I'm just talking about having data in the first instance. So, and there's a whole lot of facets that come from this. There's a whole lot of challenges that actually stem from data, like lack of regulations, lack of expertise in the industry to even get this data. And, I just want to push a little bit forward on the regulations aspect, because I think this influences us getting data. So to put it into perspective, we have joined on to the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and we have to set targets on our clients' data, our clients' emissions, which is our Scope 3. We have to set Scope 3 targets, which is our clients' Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. But we don't have that data. We don't collect our clients' Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, so therefore we have to rely on other agencies like PCAF, which is the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Finances, to be able to estimate our financed emissions. So, I mean, it's a little bit technical there, and it comes from us having no data. We've not collected our clients' data to be able to set these targets on. So we use a lot of assumptions in this first instance. So if it is we do have the regulations and the legislation in place that mandate our customers, mandate our companies having to disclose their emissions, we will now be able to set more realistic targets and then work with our customers, work with our clients to establish these decarbonization strategies and transition plans that we definitely need to have. We right now would be looking at, and we're doing a lot of research, and we are working with our clients and actively looking at how to set decarbonization plans for our real estate targets and our power sector target that we've already set. But the learning out there isn't applicable and adaptable too much to the Caribbean perspective. So we now need to rework, and it's a little bit difficult, the position that we are in, but we are actively doing it, and we are actively seeking consultants and working with consultants and, working with people who already have the knowledge and know-how to do these things. So yes, there are issues. Yes, we are trying to find solutions, but I think if it is we do have the regulations in place, like what Keishan would have said, it would help us and push us forward.
And we do have other bankers in the room. I'll try not to name any names or look in that direction. But do you think it would help to have a coordinated response or lobby may not be the word here, but championing of this issue with the state?
100%. I definitely agree with that. I mean, we are the only English-speaking bank that's on the PRB and the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So we consult with ourselves right now. That's just all kidding. We actually do sit on global tables where we consult with the North American banks as well as the European banks, but they are quite a bit of steps ahead of us. Yes, we are learning from them, but we also need to, if it is we have an alliance with our banks here, we are able to put forward and lobby the government to do certain things and probably have the right voices in the room to have the right frameworks comprised.
Fantastic. Anthony, coming to you now, picking up on that point of data, can you tell us a little bit about some of the more successful projects or the impacts that you have noted and monitored and reported on from the Green Fund?
Just briefly, there has been the VTV project. So Mr. Baka would have experienced the cooperation of the Green Fund to assist with his project. This project had reached out to 8 rural communities in North, Central, and South Trinidad, and it brought all the success that he had set out to achieve through the Green Fund. But prior to that, without calling names, there have been major successes with turtle conservation projects, and you know how important that is for our ecotourism in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as for the survival of the turtle, which is now an environmentally sensitive species. And there have been other types of projects over the years which have borne fruit, and in most cases, these have been based in rural communities. Some have been small, reforestation, replanting projects. Others have been of a larger scale. We've had to deal with some coming from tertiary institutions, which have bordered on pure research, which really did not meet the criteria of the Green Fund, because our emphasis, at least during my tenure, would be to focus on projects that are applied out in the field with tangible results, not the award of PhD theses as the end point of it. So, you know, there have been some controversial projects of that nature, and we have to evaluate to the best of our ability and defend when we either support or do not recommend.
There are many things we can talk about in relation to the Green Fund, but the fund currently stands at $10 billion, or just around TT dollars.
I think that the last published report, stated about 10 billion plus.
Yeah. Well, you seem to be imploring folks gathered here to apply. So I guess that suggests that the fund is undersubscribed. And I'm wondering if you have information on what some of those deterrents might be.
I have formulated my opinions. I am not aware, first of all, I'm not aware of any project having been refused or turned down due to lack of funding. Never in the history of Green Fund has that ever happened. Some people, applicants, have complained about the complexity of the application process. I summarized it there in the PowerPoint presentation. I myself agree, that it is complicated. It takes months sometimes to prepare with the best of people's abilities and so on. But the key points now are the pre-registration. Once you're registered, or once you have applied under one of the 4 subheads there, I'm doing everything possible during my 2-year tenure to ensure that these projects are fast-tracked and they are processed to the best of our ability. So we're trying to minimize the bureaucracy and try to expedite, simplify and expedite. Those are really my 2 watchwords to my committee. So hopefully we'll get a whole faster turnover of projects. So please, again, I'm imploring again, please prepare your projects, submit them, and we'll talk to the minister. You know our minister. You've heard her this morning. You all know of her style. And I think she and I are on the same page in terms of trying to simplify and expedite the Green Fund business. Okay?
And one more question from me before I put it to the floor. Tracy, I get the impression that your worldview, given your background, doesn't quite align or may not be compatible with a lot of the frameworks we discuss at events like this. You know, where you hear the financial sector, you know, they have their own sort of parameters that they operate within. Of course, the state has its own regulations, etc. Where do you find yourself in that mix? When you think of what is available, the apparatus that is available to address the issues we came here to talk about, where do you see yourself in the mix?
Where do I see myself? Well, you know, I'm an indigenous person and a storyteller. I think that my mission so far, actually I was talking to a friend at lunch and I was saying I felt like I left ARIMA in my 20s to go to town to tell people about indigenous people, to say we're still alive, etc. My entire career as a journalist has been around making sure that that story of survival is told. I've told it in the newspapers, in magazines, I made a film. And so I think that, you know, because of the fallout of colonialism, capitalism, etc., I don't have many peers in the indigenous community in Trinidad or even in the region. You know, I had the medicine man, Christo, say to me that I am one of the more articulate persons in the community. And I accept it as a compliment, but then I also accept it with some sadness, you know, because I think that it does put me in a position to act as a bridge. But also, it saddens me that, you know, the simplicity of indigenous life is viewed through a particular lens, which continues to cast us as primitive and uneducated, you know? So I accept my position on this stage in this esteemed company, but I also understand it in the context of which I exist. And so when you talk about existential crisis, well, I mean, I kind of live it every day. I live it every day. You know, and particularly, I suppose, now when I'm in Port of Spain, and I talked about the disconnection earlier, but I mean, even now in this room, everyone is wearing a blazer or a sweater. Is there any real reason why we need to design buildings like this? Why are we not designing for our environment? Why are we not embracing the opportunity to dress for our environment? I visited Samoa and Fiji for Chogam, not this last one, the one before. And there were so many men in sarongs. None of them had a crisis about their masculinity. There were male police officers in the airport in sarongs. There were men playing volleyball on the beach in sarongs. There were men going to official meetings like Chogam in sarongs. And, you know, if I saw 3 pairs of closed shoes, I saw a lot. You know, they have embraced their environment. They're dressing for their environment. They're building for their environment. We talk about walking cities when we go to New York and London. But do we really want a walking city in Port of Spain? Because I feel like we're quite fearful of walking in Port of Spain. But do you know that the only way to reclaim it is to walk in Port of Spain? So we are very disconnected. And I think that that is at the heart of how we're looking at our environment. You know, before Trinidad gained independence, there was a law which said that you are responsible for the front of your house. Mm-hmm. You are responsible for the front of your house. If the grass in the drain in front of your house is at 5 feet, you are responsible. We have let that go, of course. No, that's for municipal.
Nope.
You know,
it is still the law.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people do things. People do things like park cars and, you know, throw garbage in the front of their house, and they just don't seem to care. But they'd be like, oh, how do we stop the flooding?
Yeah.
Why isn't the government doing something? But we don't even care to take care of our front yards. You know, I always remember Professor Julian Kenny lamenting all of the loss that would have been caused every dry season, which we're in now, with fires. Because he would say the average Trinidadian isn't even conscious of what a 4x4 square in their front or backyard is. What is in that 4x4 square? You could have the cure for various diseases right in that 4x4 square in your yard. We don't give a shit. Well, we're burning hillsides. We're quarrying, you know, and so I think it's that disconnection, you know. We don't understand. There isn't another we all live together at the top of this mountain, and we have to figure it out. And I think COVID actually taught us that, we don't do so badly on our own, We actually have great soil and clean water. And trust that those things are going to really be, the things that govern survival in the future. And we have that in abundance here. And so we kind of have to take steps, I think, really to protect what we already have.
Thanks to forestry.
Thanks to forestry.
Thanks to forestry.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just press pause on that.
That's right. That was a full stop.
Let's invite questions or comments now from the audience. We don't have much time. We are at the 4:32 mark.
Yeah.
Saeed, and maybe if anyone else wants to start approaching another mic in the meantime.
Hi, good day. My question is to Mr. Lorde. Hi, Mr. Lorde, how are you?
I was fine.
So, firstly, I just wanted to start by complimenting you for the TPRC currently executing a very courageous project in partnership with Unite Caribbean and Swim called the Don't Toss It and Compost It project. Now, my question is really as it pertains to scale, right? So, 733,624 tons. That's the amount of waste that is sent to our landfills on an average year. Over 50% of this is organic, right? Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, there is a system of open tray trucks by the regional corporations that are meant to collect these organic wastes and to reasonably, responsibly dispose of them, right? So my question is, while I really do applaud household change and mindset shift as it pertains to families in Trinidad and Tobago, what I really want to find out is as it pertains to scale, at what point or to what extent can we integrate into some of these presently existing systems to quickly get a lot of change and impact done? And I'll just hinge that on part 2, where if there is to no extent that we can use this, what do you think are the deterrents to this? And why can't we use these systems to maximize on the scale of the amount of organic waste or any sort of waste that we better responsibly dispose of?
So let me just tackle the last part first, which is what are the constraints? One, finance is a constraint. As a matter of simple math, the corporation's contracted expenditure, at least by me, is $48 million per year for garbage disposal. That is open tray, compactor, all of garbage disposal. In the past few years, of course, there's one economic pie. It's not getting bigger, so it has to be shared accordingly. We've not been able to meet that planned expenditure on a constant basis. We have, in the past 2 years, attempted, in partnership with ECIAF, to do some composting. We did start as a pilot with taking all of the refuse from the markets within the region to ECIAF to compost in the hope that we can recycle, reuse, and commercialize as compostable goods. Of course, 1, technical capacity became an issue, and 2, space became an issue. But it's not all gloom and doom, because in the past 2 weeks, I was fortunate to have a conversation with an organization, close something, probably close the loop, something like that, where we are reinvigorating that conversation about redirecting our green waste, all of our organic waste towards close the loop. We hope, and this is where we'll take the conversation, that there is a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship between the 2 organizations. 1, we keep the waste out of the landfill, and 2, there is a trickle-down economy that's formed by engaging in that type of upcycling of the waste. And of course, we hope that as the commercial interest is served, the public interest is served, because as a representative of state, we are called now more than ever to be prudent managers of the limited resources that we do have. And therefore, one of the things that is very important in this time is our ability to generate revenue to offset other costs that we incur as a municipality. That goes back into the services that you see. The more workers that, even though it's not what the law says. We come and cut in front of the yard. And that's because we've allowed it to become that. But these things have costs that we must now cover. And we hope that engaging in these type of mutually beneficial partnerships with organizations like Close the Loop, we will be able to create a nice little local economy and of course generate some revenue for the corporation that goes back into the services that we offer to the public.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, afternoon. My name is Mary-Louise Norton-Murray, and I am representing the European Business Chamber. Firstly, congratulations to IAMovement for this conference, for the speakers and panels. I think so far it's been really an excellent conference. I wanted to give some suggestions, comments, and in some cases, questions. Firstly, I'm so glad that the regional corporation was featured, and there was also a question from a regional corporation earlier on. I think the regional corporations really do have a big role to play in greening of Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the suggestions, and you may already have it, is the need for each regional corporation to have an inventory of all their natural assets, the value of these assets, and define the natural assets, of course, a little more broadly than just maybe forestry, or include water tables, flora, fauna, etc., as a starting point. And I'm aware that there was a project many years ago organized by UDICOT that allowed each of the 14 regional corporations to develop some sort of, I think it was a physical plan or physical urban plan or something like that. And I had the opportunity to read a couple of them, and they were really, really well done. And I remember particularly the Tunapuna Piarco one, because it included the Northern Range. And in fact, Senator Vera's idea of a protective area, or that idea of protecting the Northern Range may have come from that plan.
In that plan, yes.
Okay, Senator Vera also mentioned, that despite the fact that we're in an election year, that sustainability and greening of Trinidad and Tobago is not on the political agenda so far. And really and truly, it really should be part of the political agenda. I mean, even for economics, for diversification, for all sorts of reasons, it should be there. And just some suggestions. Firstly, I know I've brought this up before at other conferences, but there's some legislation in Parliament, making the wrongs over and over, and sometimes lapsing and having to be revived again. Two in particular. One is on sustainable fisheries management. That has been in Parliament for, I'm sure, more than 4 or 5 years, and it's actually a really important piece of legislation for the sustainable fisheries industry. I mean, not only is it going to help us maintain our fisheries ourselves, but it's going to open up a whole set of new export markets because right now we're not allowed, for example, to export to the EU because we haven't passed this piece of legislation which contains something about illegal, unregulated, unreported fisheries, which is an international agreement which we have signed. We've signed on to it, but we haven't implemented it. And it's in that legislation, which has been in Parliament for 4, 5, 6 years, who knows how long. The other piece of legislation that is in Parliament is the sustainable energy legislation. Also been back, I know there's the policy, we keep hearing when that it's been written, drafted, etc. It's in Parliament, or it's going to get to Parliament this year. This year became last year. Now, hopefully, it will be this year. But those pieces of legislation, I think, people in this room, chambers, etc., IAMovement, etc., advocacy on legislation that is important for greening is one way of getting it on the political agenda. If we all advocate for what's already there, drafted, ready, prepared, and I have no idea what is causing this delay. I can't even fathom why they would want to delay things like sustainable energy, all right? Okay, the other thing, just a suggestion, is there are a lot of potential corporate sponsors in this room who work already with children and education. Having children talk, right, do essays, competitions, etc., may be another way of getting greening on the political agenda. Right, okay, and those are my suggestions. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up this panel. Oh, sorry.
Hello?
Oh, yes.
Hi, good evening. So the question is to the panel on a whole. It
Sorry,
seems.
okay, yeah, now we can hear.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to me that there's a disconnect or some sort of communication silos between various stakeholders. For example, Ms. Mahabir, you had mentioned that your bank is the only one who currently sits on the Green Initiative, right? Is that correct?
The Principles for Responsible Banking.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are the only one in the English-speaking Caribbean still that sits on the Principles for Responsible Banking as well as the Net Zero Banking Alliance.
So then, I believe in terms of action, right? So the commitment basically is to coordinate, right, with, of course, Mr. Green, right? And then secondly, between Mr. Lorde and Mr. Ramnarine, being a government ministry and agency, how then do we expand the conversation, not just operating in silos, but to have actionable deliverables being done, not just on a limited level, but across the national community as a whole?
Anthony, would you like to go first?
The standard approach to the Green Fund is voluntary. It is the only way that we know. Persons or groups or agencies or NGOs or certain government type organizations, and let me just clarify this as we talk about regional cooperation, organizations that are created by statute, such as the regional corporations, the EMA, the IMA, WASA, they are all eligible to apply, and they have applied. Other regional corporations have received funding. So while we are talking about that this afternoon and, in a sense, encouraging it, I would still like to see the majority of applications coming from environmental NGOs who are based on the ground. And during my tenure, I have seen very few applications coming from that source. So if we are to coordinate the actions leading to Green Fund, financing of projects, somebody else has to do it. We cannot compromise our position as being neutral by influencing others to apply. But if they are so inclined and they can be influenced to do it, and if some of the more experienced agencies that have succeeded can assist some of those very small rural environmental groups to complete the application forms and to submit, then all the better for everybody.
Let me just jump in there a second, Ardene. I think it's important, we now getting to the point where we, at the meat of it, coordinate and collaborate. So voluntarily, I'm saying, yes, we come into the Green Fund. But on that element, one of the things that's important is that within the government space, green is kind of still not yet fully entrenched. So there is, I would call it a dearth of technical capacity in some spaces. That requires us now, those of us that have the interest, to go out and find the persons who are actively working in the space, and where myself as a regional corporation may be able to sign on with a collaborator and say, hey, we are going to back this project. You have the know-how, we have some resource. You bring your A to the table, I'll bring my B, and I will call the Minister of Planning and say, MP, I need some help. Then we can do that. But it must have an interest. The reality is, and this is by no way a cop-out, within the state sector, there is a balancing of interests. Officers have a multiplicity of responsibilities, and therefore, where something is very technical, or I would even argue arduous to get through the gates, it very often ends up on the bottom of the pile because I have 10 other fires happening at the same time. So, and I'm going to say now, I'm grateful for organizations like IAMovement, who have been working in the space, who have the technical capacity, who have the know-how, and who have demonstrated themselves to be willing collaborators and partners who are willing to come to us and say, hey, back us, let's do this in your community. You bring what you could bring, we'll bring what we can bring, but let's make it happen. And I think that goes back to the concept of that collective consciousness. We need to get more people interested and involved and saying that this isn't someone else's responsibility, it's mine. And then when we all put our hands and heads together, we get a better product. So that would be my contribution to it, which is that the more hands, the lighter the work becomes. And that's what we need at this point in time, more collaborators.
Thank you. I know we had one more question. If we can squeeze it in very quickly.
Hello, this is for Mr. Ramnarine. A lot of people don't know about the Green Fund. A lot of people, well, I've heard this, they say that there's a backlog of projects. You know, can more be done for people to know about it? Can more be done for them to be processed faster? You know, can people like Tracy be involved in like what projects should be highlighted? I just feel like $10 billion is sitting down, and the people who are aware of it are like, this can be so useful. So do you believe more can be done, and what can be done, and how can it become more accessible to people?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I think my presence here today and the Minister's presence this morning would be a good starting point for us to embark upon some kind of wider publicity and awareness program for the Green Fund. I'm sure Minister would agree to that. We cannot fund ourselves from the Green Fund, but we will certainly use whatever resources we have available and take this forward, because I'm appreciating, after all these years working in forestry, I'm appreciating the fact that so much more needs to be done in our environment, both land and ocean and river and everything else. And I am fully convinced that we in the Green Fund could do some more to publicize and educate the public. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion.
Wonderful, and thank you to our panelists. Can we give them some appreciation, please?